Welcome to UberCube, the podcast we discuss all things Cube, but with refreshments.
Sure. Anthony, thanks for the intro and glad to finally be on the show with you all. You know, coming up on a year now since the UberCubeathon last year. So I'm Lincoln. I'm the designer of the Penrose Cube and the organizer of Capital Cube Championship, which is a cube series we run here in the Washington, D.C. area. Our inaugural one was last August. We're looking to have hold another one later this year and kind of going forward as an annual thing. In terms of how I kind of came to Cube and how I came to be here, I've been a Magic player for longer than I can remember now, probably going back to Mirrodin days, original Mirrodin days, you know, starting out playing kitchen table Magic, and then, you know, kind of eventually got down the route of getting into EDH back before Commander was a thing, when it really was, you know, old school EDH, you know, big chunky creatures and whatnot. And have, you know, now been designing cubes and playing Cube for the last coming up on 10 years now. So started out, you know, I think like a lot of people do with the vintage Cube and kind of thinking that was the design of Cube and what Cube meant, and really have been excited to see over the last couple of years kind of the proliferation of a lot of different ideas in the Cube space and getting to play my little tiny part with Penrose and kind of spreading some of that there as well.
Perfect.
So, very nice.
You got something you want to add?
Yeah, I would like to add. Now, so we've understood a little bit about Lincoln as a Magic player. What about Lincoln as a beverage enjoyer? As we always do every episode, we ask our guests to bring along and choose a beverage for the recording. So what you got for us?
Sure, yeah, so I have this delicious Bingo Lager from Bingo Beer Company in Richmond, Virginia. I have to go with one of my, I'm not hometown in the sense of from Virginia, not especially local. It's a couple hours drive, but I love a good lager, and so on a Friday night, nothing better.
Nice.
How about yourself, the lovely May? What are you having on this wonderful Friday?
So I actually picked out a very interesting one called Captain's Club. You can't really see it, but it has like a really funky, almost neon pattern that kind of looks like some some coconut trees. But it's a sour ale, tropical sour ale. Ooh. So I'm very excited for it.
And then Stu and I are going to do some twinsies here. And pardon me with my voice a little bit. The allergy season has come online. But Sierra Nevada, Juicy Little Thing IPA, the Hazy IPA. So let's crack them open. All right, I'm going to clear my throat again. I have to. I'm sorry.
It is the pollening.
It's killing me.
It is the pollening right now, as we call it here in North Carolina. And
you know, I went to college in North Carolina, and it is truly the worst time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But it is gross. Everything is covered with dust for like 2 months.
It's crazy how it goes from, you know, we get the winter where it's cool, right? We had a little bit of snow this year, which was nice, but then suddenly you go from 40s and 50s every day to like 60s and 70s, and that pollen, like, I can't see the paint job on my car anymore because of the amount of like this dust that just appears everywhere, and everyone's walking around sneezing and nasal spraying and, you know, popping whatever their allergy medicine of choice is. But yeah, it's pretty brutal. So Anthony is going to be a little, you know,
a little The Happening, the really bad M. Night Shyamalan film. That everybody's like, this movie's stupid. I'm like, no, this movie's real, man.
Yeah,
these plants are trying to kill you. Like, this is real. Like, I felt for Mark Wahlberg the whole time. I'd be out there hacking in the middle of the field. So let's kind of do this a little bit. This is kind of by request. Our good friend Alex Newsbaum reached out to me, and we're going to do actually a much deeper dive. My intent, and I've got big dreams. I like to think of myself as a big dreamer. I've actually probably overshot a little bit, but I want to get at some point all of, you know, the small cube. I want to do a roundtable. I want to do a roundtable open discussion on UberCube. I've been thinking about that for a long time. But for now, Alex Newsbaum reached out to me, and he kind of just wanted to hear, and we'll start out with you, Lincoln, in particular, kind of the formula for running an event. And we're going to start that as a kind of a minor focus of this episode. So tell us a little bit about your event and what you did to execute it, top level.
Yeah, no, happy to dive into that. So Capital Cube Championship, last year we ran it just as a one-day event. So we had 2 kind of main event rounds, you know, 8 pods of cubes, Swiss pairings that then fed into by points into a top 8, and had some open cubing in the evening there. And, you know, I think that we've seen, you know, events kind of run things in different ways in terms of the number of rounds in a day and whatnot. But I really think for myself as a player, having played at a number of these other events now, 2 main event rounds in one day is already like a lot to throw people into. And so I think, kind of capping it out there and, force the really sweaty folks to go on to the top 8, but everyone else can kind of chill for the rest. The rest of it is really kind of the sweet spot. And in terms of, how it's organized, it really is just kind of a, break it down. Hopefully you can get people into cubes that they are somewhat interested in, offer a variety of different cube styles and archetypes and kind of, speeds of formats and things like that people, may gravitate to more or less. But really kind of offer that smorgasbord of options for the players so that people can, just come in and enjoy it. And I think something that we really saw last year in running Capital Cube Championship is that there were like folks there for a variety of reasons. So, we had a number of folks there who are local to the DC area and just happen to either be, former pro players or current pro players or have, gone and done the GP circuit and that kind of thing. And a number of them performed really well. And then, we had plenty of folks who either there were certainly folks who had never cubed in their life that were there, which was always
I think
great
that
to
was
see.
me, Lincoln. I think that was me.
Well, listen, I was just at the Salt Box this past weekend in Baltimore. Shout out to Max for putting on a great event there. And given my terrible performance across the 2 days of that, I also felt like a first-time cuber going into that event. So I feel you on that. But yeah, I think, really offering a variety of different environments for different folks of different skill levels and interests and, and whatnot, I think it is really kind of a critical piece of the mix there.
I will say that what you mentioned about the density of cubes, right? So that is something that I was very cognizant of when we first started talking about doing our event, because I can say for myself that if I am getting sweaty, like if it's an event and there's something on the line, be it prize support or just pride or whatever the case may be, I do generally tend to try hard, much more than I usually would, just on our random friendly fun evenings of playing Magic. I will say that one cube, we went to Sanford, yep. North Carolina. We were paying. There was prizes on the line. It was serious. After that first draft, I needed to go take a nap. And we did the draft, we played 3 games. I'm tired. Like, I need to go rest somewhere for an hour to get ready for, if we're planning to do another one. Certainly in a cube, like, tournament, it's draft, play 3 matches, another draft, play 3 matches. And then potentially if you're top 8ing, it's another draft and then another potentially 3 matches. And obviously we had to start very early, like I'm sure you guys did. You're talking, it's such a huge commitment, not just time from any player that plans on going far, but from an energy perspective and trying to keep at the top of your game is so incredibly demanding. I don't know how players who play like RCQs and Pro Tours, where you're playing like 8 matches a day, like, okay, you don't have a draft, but you've still got to play for that long throughout a day. And it is exhausting. So not just the hats off to people like yourself and obviously Anthony for even running these events, but I got to give a huge shout out to any player that will put themselves through the ringer like that to be competitive. Because I certainly, obviously, we're a Cube channel. I don't think there's many non-Magic people that are going to be listening to this, but anyone that understands what it's like to try and be competitive and play a long day or even a weekend will tell you that it is tiring. It's sapping. It takes every ounce of energy that you've got.
So at your event, I had the best of intentions. You had done something that we'll reflect upon in a few minutes, where you attended our event, and then post our event, you did a post-event write-up, which we'll get to in a moment. But when I went to your event, I went to DC. My wife and kid were going to go tour DC. I'd been there a dozen times. I'm a free man for just a little while, right? Like, okay, so I'm going to go a little wild. And I'd already went to the like Harris Teeter or whatever down the road or whatever it is. And I've got myself a 6-pack of IPAs that I paid zero attention to the percentage of. And at that point, I began to enjoy them. So somewhere throughout this day, and I remember I kept saying, Lincoln, you want a beer? And you're like literally trying to manage an event. But I'm like, come on, guys, have a beer. Have a beer. Because I need to kind of be where I'm at in the headspace. But somewhere I'm outside and I'm relaxing. And I'd already played, I believe it was, I can't remember the individual's name, and I apologize, but I'd love to have them come out to our event. Tank's Artifact Cube, I think it was. It was a wonderful...
Dozer's Artifact Cube. Yeah.
Dozer Tank, yes, yep. Absolutely. And then also I played a Peasant Plus Cube, And I kind of struggled with some aristocrats, mirror match. That was fun as heck. And then I go outside and I'm finally like, all right, I'm done. And I'm sitting outside and I'm talking to Anthony Maddox at the time. And he was kind enough to offer me a beer, which I probably didn't need at that point. And I'm just about to start sip it. And you crack open the door and you announce the top 8. And I hear Anthony and I'm thinking, I remember looking at Anthony Maddox going, uh-oh, you're in trouble. And they go, Adams. I'm like, wait a minute, dude.
Yeah, I mean, you did great at the event, and the top 8 showing, I think, really being a testament to that. But I think to Stu's point, these events really are like grueling and sapping. I think is like the best
grueling.
Words to describe them.
Love, yes, exactly. Yeah. Grueling is the best word, I think.
Let me ask you a question in regards to that. How long post one of these events do you begin playing Magic again? Do you just go the next day and play Magic? Because me, I'm off for a month.
I think that really depends on how well I do. I think if I do poorly, I'm ready to get back in the saddle, right away, because it's like, I need to get a win in somewhere. If I do well, I think it's like, okay, I need to take a little time to unwind, because the intensity of the play, it really ramps up when you get up into like, you're like, okay, maybe I'm on, in contention for getting into top 8 or whatever. All of a sudden, I'm not just here to have fun. I'm here to actually, prove something. And so paying a lot more attention to how I play and whatnot. So for me, I think that's how it kind of balances out. But I think to Stu's point, of how long and tiring these events can be, I think that also is another important reason why it's so critical to have a variety of different cubes there. Because there are going to be players who are like, yeah, I want the environment that's super, super skill testing, where like in the draft, there's no clear standout power level cards, in a pack. And I have to assess all 15 cards and figure out which is the one that has the slight, little improvement over all the others. And some players want that, for multiple rounds in a day. And other players, they do that one of those and they go, okay. And I've been in this position before. I'm like, okay, I did 100 ornithopters this round. That really broke my brain. How about I go do like, a simple, cube, or just like a peasant cube or whatever, where, it's fairly straightforward. I know all the cards. I don't have to read them. There's not a lot of text or whatever. And I can kind of like, take it a little bit easier in terms of the mental power that's required to really, parse the cube.
The problem then with that, right? Here's the problem that I have with that statement is now you're justifying the inclusion of aggro in way too many cubes, okay? And I will have this, internalized battle against aggro that I vocalize on this podcast. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes you want to go absolutely ham sandwiches when it comes to the technicality of the deck and the draft. And sometimes you just want to draft Boros aggro and not really have to use your brain too much, because you just go in face and turning creatures sideways. So yeah, and I think that's, I will say a huge shout out. Obviously, I was not present at your event. That's got to change.
He will be here this year.
I would love to go this year. We'll see.
I'm going to hold you to that, Stu.
We'll see. It's a busy year. But in our event, I was so impressed with the variety of the cubes. And not just that you want to cater for how like the flow of the event is going to go, but you also want to cater to all the players that are going to show up, right? You're not advertising any event as this is a technical cube event, or this is an aggro cube event, or a control cube event. It's just a cube event, and you want to be able to cater to a lot of those, the play styles that are going to, get the players excited.
So I kind of want to do an apples to apples kind of, as I said, my intent was when I went to your thing that I thought I'd be writing, and then, we'll just say some lost number of IPAs later, I wrote nothing. But I had the intention, and I thought about this for a long time, so I'm going to do this in no particular order. I have this not written down, just thinking about it out loud. When we did UberCubeathon versus Capital Cube Championships, I'll put yours to the left, mine the right. Everybody visualize that. I don't think I'm going to talk about it in that order, but I'll do my best. So yours was at a hotel conference room. Ours was at an LGS bar tap on tap type of scenario. Yours was driven by Gwen Decker software, the Hedron network. Ours was not, because the store likes to use Companion, and that's how they run like their RCQs and major. That's the software package that no matter what I said, that's what they're comfortable with. So we've got two different scenarios right there. So a person that wants to run their event, there is a divergence you have to choose, a path you have to choose, right? There could be a third one. It could be a church, open room, or it could be a meeting hall, or it could be whatever, outdoor barbecue picnic style Magic. I don't know if that would be ideal, but it's all options. Or you can even do like the young person that's in Wisconsin that does the cube dungeon idea, where they have people. I think it was, I think that's Noah. Noah. Yeah, Noah's event where he just
Yeah.
has people come over and it's super chill and relaxed and has mixed drinks in a bar. So you have these options that you can do as a person. Let's go kind of crossways there. So the other one was if I do it in a meeting room, one of the things that I distinctly thought about that I was pretty open about is I was concerned. Stu and I originally were planning, we talked about let's do a clubhouse type thing. We can do that, like get the local clubhouse, and we don't know how many people we can hold. It got into the liability aspects. I was concerned, what if there's a slip and fall, right? I mean, what if something happens? And then I didn't want to I was like, I'm going to LLC up and all that, which I intend to do still actually with UberCube. It's on my plan, but that is something that you need to think about when you're planning these events. It's so, and I don't mean to get like all legal on that, but it is a thought, like what if something happens? So maybe the hotel covers the homeowner's insurance in that idea. Well, the LGS covered the liability in mine. If you do it at your barbecue, you can have a great time, but what if? I mean, the what if is real, right? This is a factor that we thought about. The Hedron network is far superior, absolutely far superior to the option that I am provided. But the thing is I don't have the time to run that event. I'm trying to be the social bumblebee and move around the room. I can't afford to sit there and manage that. And the judges at this LGS are quite content with Companion. Companion is not designed for Cube. This is kind of a strike against UberCube. The positive side of yours is the players kind of get to pick their route. Like choose your own adventure. So I picked an artifact cube and a peasant cube. These are two cubes that I'm quite content with. Probably shouldn't have chose those because then I wouldn't have ended up in your top 8 and I could have had the beer with Anthony Maddox and enjoyed myself. But you can choose your route at yours. My store, it's crazy. They are openly like, Cubers got to know how to just be on the fly. Like I have tried to talk to them. They're like, you got to know how to adapt and overcome. The store manager's like, that's what Cube's about. They are a Cube store. That is their Cube vibe, is whatever cube comes in front of you, you just play that thing. There's a positive to that. Most people may not see that initially. Like, I want to play the cube that fast tracks me to the top 8. There is something to be said about playing a cube that you're not good at. I faced this last night in our good friend Sandwich's bug cube. I almost had a breakdown in front of everybody telling them I suck at this cube so bad. I'm never going to win at this cube, which is true, actually, and I still didn't win. But at least as of last night, they sat down with me with my little temper tantrum and taught me how to play this cube. I was forced way outside of my comfort zone because if you just asked Anthony, I'm going to play artifacts, I'm going to play peasant.
I think there's an argument there to, in an event like either Capital Cube, UberCubeathon, even all the way up to CubeCon, right? How much control and how much of a choice do you give to the players when it comes to the cube that they are going to draft? Right? Do you just say, there is no choice, we are randomizing every single player for every single cube that's in all rounds, and you are going to play what you're put into?
Well, I'd like to add something so it doesn't come off as super negative about what's happening to us, because it would, if you're listening to this, you're like, oh crap, it's random. It is random. It's random, but I'm going to tell you with intent. I knew this was coming, so I actually made round 1 kind of like peasant, pauper. I wanted it to feel kind of like you're just having a cup of coffee and you're waking up, and all these cubes are not the same, but I wanted them to be like more kind of like you guys talked about at the end of the night. Maybe I should have flipped this, but I wanted them to be less complex, less intimidating for an approach, because this is what I've got to deal with.
Okay, so, all right, May, I'm going to put you on the spot, right? So you're signing up for a cube event, right? There's huge prizes on the line, and you have taken a loan out for $500 to play in this event, all right? I don't know why you were forced to do so or you did so willingly, doesn't matter. But now you've got a stake in this before you even sit down at the first draft, right?
And Freddie the Shark said he'll be by your house at 2 p.m. on Friday.
Exactly, okay? So my first train of thought goes, as a competitive player, I want the max information and the max amount of control over my destiny. So if I am playing for money and I have a stake in this right off the bat, I want to be able to control the cubes that I draft that fits the play style, the power level, my familiarity, all that kind of stuff, right? But I've also got to think, I want to have fun. I want to enjoy myself. I don't want to be, even if I've paid money towards it, right? Maybe $500 is a lot of money for people, even if it's like $50 or $20, right? Whatever amount of money is impactful, is meaningful, right? Where do you draw that line between I want to be able to have an amount of control over it because I want to be competitive to I want to have fun?
So, I'm sure there was a question in there somewhere, but I think to sum it up is that there is a certain degree of balance that you can have in the event in order to ensure that people are able to draft the things that they are comfortable with, while also allowing them to showcase what their skills are. However, we're not here to only talk about the LGSs, whatnot. We're not here just to talk about event whatnot. We're here to talk about the Penrose Cube. And in the context of the Penrose Cube, it is definitely an environment that has lots of fun choices. And when I look at the kind of list for this, I'm not really sure how I'd play it competitively, right? Like, there's
now you know how I
degree.
felt sitting at a table full of people that know how to play Magic. I'm like, what is this?
I do. I do. I picked lanes with this, and I did a couple of drafts. Lincoln, you can go check out. I did a couple of drafts on Cube Cobra, and we can talk about those at some point while we're talking about your cube. I felt this cube had enough sort of signposts for either the payoffs or the engines where I feel like you can, if you've done enough to pick your lane early on, there's choices that will become very prominent and very apparent fairly quickly. And I will say this. I love cubes that allow some kind of creativity throughout the draft. It's not like, hey, I'm going to choose this one value piece, this one engine piece, and then every other card that I pick is either that or it's going in the sideboard, right? I love the fact that there are lanes that you can choose regardless of the archetype. And I felt that. So I felt like it was good for me to be able to pick a lane that I felt was interesting and something that I could utilize to win games, but also that I could be creative during the draft to find things that would be fun.
I want to kind of pitch this as a ABC kind of question
Anything
series.
but country?
Yeah,
we're
here
not
we go.
talking about music. This is
All
not
right.
a music podcast.
So this is
Anthony.
all directed towards Lincoln. I'm going to hit you with all these at once, so you can paragraph this out as you go. So I want to know the inspiration of the cube. I want to understand the budget restriction that you have behind it. And I want to know the goals of what you're trying to do and blend in some synergies in there. That's a lot. Just free flow.
Okay, let me make sure I got that right. The inspiration, the goals, and what was the last one?
You had a budget and you have some synergies.
Budget. Okay, yes, easy enough. All right. So inspiration, yeah. So this cube came about literally on the flight to the first CubeCon in 2022, 2023, whenever that was. I was on the flight and I was kind of brainstorming some ideas, and I really loved the Ultimate Masters draft format, if anyone's played that. And so I was like, oh, maybe I could do a cube that's kind of inspired by Ultimate Masters or whatever. And then I got to CubeCon, and I actually had not looked at the list of cubes that were going to be available there before I got there. I just it was like, oh, this event seems cool, I'm going to go. And I was, much to my surprise and joy, I found that there was a cube there called the Ultimate Masters Inspired Cube by Zach Barash, who's probably more famous for his Cascade Cube. And I had the pleasure of, I think it was actually the very last day of the event to draft that. And Zach was in the pod, and getting to draft it and play it with him was a true blast. And so I was like, okay, someone's done the perfect Ultimate Masters inspired cube, but like, I think there's a riff here, you know, where you can take some of those core themes that are in Ultimate Masters and kind of run with them. And so that was really the basis of the Penrose cube to start. The second piece of it was Derek Gallen around that time kind of had started talking on social media about this idea of bar cube, and bar cube being this concept of you have a cube that, as he articulates it, is played unsleeved. Typically it has just enough cards to play for 4 players. None of the cards require tokens or counters or any kind of external game objects like the Monarch or whatever else. And so you can just pick it up, put it in your pocket, literally in your pocket. I think he carries his around in his Ziploc bag, and take it to a bar and play with your friends. And I was like, okay, this idea rocks. This is great. I'm not sure I'm willing to commit this hard to, like, for example, I hate riffle shuffling. So like I have to have sleeves on my cards to shuffle them because I personally cannot riffle shuffle. So I tweaked it a little bit, and I kept to the main restraint there of there shouldn't be any counters or tokens. So, and I wanted to be able to play it with 8 players. So that was kind of the core of where we got to. And finally, I really enjoy graveyard synergy type stuff. And so there was a lot of graveyard synergy things that went into the cube as well. So that was the inspiration. The budget piece was also something that flowed out of the bar cube aspect of this. That like, hey, if this is something that you want to be able to just take to the bar, you're playing it with strangers, you don't know maybe sometimes, and you don't have to worry about like if a card goes missing, like if there's any risk there. You don't have to worry about if someone spills their beer on the table, or they're eating their pretzel and cheese, and then touch your cards or whatever. Like they destroy them. Like you're not worried about it. So the original restraint I started out with was no card that cost more than $2, and the total cost of the cube could not be more than $100. And when I originally designed it, I think I bought all the cards in it for something like $78, and it has since gone up in price pretty substantially for a couple of reasons. Number one, I did buy a full set of the Surveil lands when they first came out in Murders at Karlov Manor, when at the time they were only like $2 a piece. And so I actually bought a playset because I was like, these are definitely underpriced, and like I'm going to use these in every cube going forward, which I think everyone has come to find that you do in every cube.
I have the regrets.
Well, those don't cost $2 anymore. They're now like $15.
No, they don't. They're expensive.
So the cube now I think is $200+, but literally half the cost of that is just the Surveil lands, and so that is kind of the design restraint is nominally out of the window in that respect. But I know there's some people who, when they design budget cubes, they actually track the live price of the cards, and they will take things out if they get too expensive. But personally, I just kind of went for what was it when you went to buy them.
I find this really interesting because when I was looking at your cube list, and I got an opportunity to play it, and this cube is, it's absolutely, it kind of kicks the feet out underneath you because there's powerful cards, and you said the word budget, and May and you are literally walking in tandem, as in, I pride myself, we joke about this, I have cubes that I think I want to get all the foils and shiny, and sometimes people can't even see the cards, right? 'Cause it's kind of a big deal to me, but not realizing that the 2 cubes that both of you have designed actually are better for a multitude of reasons. One, they're accessible, they're visible, people can sit down and play them, they don't have to worry about the light shining on them. If you both, I love the Fey cube for this reason.
I want to highlight that right there.
I love everything about
I want to highlight what you just said right there. This was something that actually came up during an event. All the beautiful foils. I like a foil from time to time, right? I generally tend to move away from the instants and sorceries on a foil, but on a permanent, it looks so pretty on the battlefield. But my goodness, we were playing at a store. In fact, this was the event in Sanford, North Carolina, at Ravenfest, and I've got foil cards, and I'm having to tilt them around, like in the room at the time. Like, what the heck is this?
And then they had
card?
that concave curvature too.
Oh yeah, it was a bit of a
with the lighting.
nightmare.
It can be really hard to see.
Yeah.
So I go back and forth on this. The way I like to think about it, I also have a very I'll leave it to players to go onto Cube Cobra and see exactly how much money I've dumped into this thing. But I have another cube. It's a vintage cube that is all blinged out. It's there's a bunch of altered cards and alternate arts and artist proofs and things like that in there that. I put together, and that is like, my baby in a lot of ways. And so, and I really enjoy playing that too. I honestly enjoy playing Penrose more, and I think that these serve different purpose. I think there's a type of cube that's your daily driver, and there's a type of cube that's the Mercedes convertible that you take out on those beautiful, Saturday afternoons in the spring. And so I think these both have a place. But again, they just serve a different purpose, and so knowing kind of where they sit within your collection of cubes, I think, is like the key piece there.
So it's funny you should mention blinged out, because we're going to take a little commercial break here, right in the middle of this. So I don't know if you saw the announcement that like maybe I lost a little self-control today. I did. So I'm going to go ahead and say it. We have an anonymous donor. I love you, Steven. I won't say the person's last name because he's going to literally punch me.
Still anonymous.
Still anonymous. Sweetest person in the world. Like, I'm a fan of him just as much as he's a fan of us. But I got a box in the mail. And for our event this year, did you see the news that I couldn't even hold myself back from posting? So we're going to talk about that just for a second. Just put a little bling in there. This is for UberCubeathon. I got to do the little promotional break here, but I'm going to let Stu say this because his voice is prettier. Could you please tell them what is now on the line? It is. I got to give these away. I'm giving them all away.
That's what I'm saying. Anyway, we'll get to that later. So yes, a good friend of ours, and we'll just call him Stephen for now, if you would prefer to name semi-anonymous. Stephen has been a long-time supporter of the channel and of us and of UberCube and Cube in general, and is just absolutely...
And coming to UberCubeathon.
And is coming to UberCubeathon. So Stephen decided that he would like to contribute some additional prize support to UberCubeathon 2025. So I'm just going to give a quick rundown of a handful of... Just they're rather nice. All right, little additions. Yes. Rather nice. So the first one I'm going to say is a foil Chris Muller signed Meddling Mage from Plane Shift. Rather nice. A foil Defense Grid signed by Mark Teddin. A foil Watery Grave from Guilds of Ravnica signed by Rob Alexander. A foil Channel signed by Rebecca Gay. And last but certainly not least, a signed and altered Tiger.
Which I'm giving away to the first place prize. That's
where you're going to
get it this year, aren't you? You got to take down Tyro. I know it's going to happen.
There's going to be a technical glitch.
Anthony, I was going to say, I was coming into the UberCubeathon this year thinking, okay, I can just take it. I don't have to anything to prove. I already proved myself last year.
Yeah, you did.
I can rest on my laurels and just come and have fun.
No.
When I saw two things, I saw that altered, and as I just mentioned, I have a cube where I run a bunch of alters and whatever. When I saw that altered Taiga, I was like, okay, never mind. It's serious. It's serious. We're getting first place this year.
So here's what we're going to do to actually...
We're looping back to the stakes conversation.
Well, I want to take this down a notch for the stake. So we've talked about this before. We're going to switch gears. We'll go back to the Penrose Cube. I know we're kind of bouncing around here a little bit, and I apologize for that. So the difference between our event and your event, again, was... We talked about this a lot, and I really just hold the comments for a moment. But the difference is yours, you had a pen, you had a beautifully artist rendered mat. I mean, it is gorgeous, and you had a split. Oh, what was it? You had the fetch land.
Flooded strand.
Thank you. Absolutely, phenomenal, right? I mean, you had an equal amount of that too. And one of the things that I dealt with and I really tussled with is the store wants to do prize support because they're a prize support store. This is back to that LGS type thing. Anthony wouldn't have done this if we had the barbecue event, right? I would have bought you a beer or a 6-pack. But
I don't know about that.
Putting money on the line is what we're doing. So the top prize, I'm going to go ahead and just announce now, I'm putting this altered Taiga in the top prize, along with the $450, along with other stuff that we're working on. There's more things that we're going to unveil. I just have to finish some art and whatnot. But that's a big deal. But the money was something we talked about previously. It was a little gut wrenching to kind of put stakes on the table. But I think the price of eggs nowadays, I don't feel so bad about it, right? If you can go buy groceries and you win, and most importantly, you get a free ticket to CubeCon if you take first place. So there's a lot in the first place package. These other ones, all these other amazing cards, and by the way, we've got multiple boxes. I'm just going to throw them in the raffle. So I want to encourage people who are not sweaty, not grindy, who are there just to have fun, and you have a ticket. And I want to do it kind of post round too, so you keep hanging out, keep playing, right? And you're going to get a free beer with that ticket and all that stuff too. But we're going to raffle this stuff out. So I'm only going to want to make the Taiga sweaty.
I want to go all the way back to a long time ago where we did a charity event. Do you remember that?
We did.
Anthony?
It was for Extra Life.
It was for Extra Life. We did a charity event.
Children's Miracle Network.
For Children's Miracle, exactly. So we did that, and it was either $15 or $20 that we were charging people to come and come cube draft and just hang out and have fun.
And then we Santa Claused.
We Santa Claus. And I will say this. We were just chucking packs at people, 3 and 4 at a time. We got boxes. Where did those boxes come from?
Mr. Cornfall.
From the... no, shh. You don't say that name.
Oh, I said,
you don't say that name.
From Stephen.
From Stephen. Thank you.
Because he loves the children.
Stephen gave us this prize support for this event that we were going to go and run for charity. And... the joy on the players' faces. Yeah, they'd spent $20. That money's going to charity. We got those donations, and we were just chucking packs at players, and they were like, you know what? This is fun. I'm getting to cube draft, but now I'm just getting packs of Magic cards thrown at me for just playing.
I did it last year, too, at UberCubeathon.
It was.
When people are in their fleet. So let's go back to your...
It's an easy way to turn those frowns upside down for anyone that... You can see the looks on those people's faces when they might be struggling a bit. Their record ain't so good. They don't really vibe with the deck that they've drafted. But you know what? you're getting 3 or 4 packs of Magic cards thrown at you, so you're having a good time.
I'm gonna Christmas this one up too, and we gave out like little bottle openers. We're gonna do the whole thing again. So let's get back. We're done with this long-winded commercial. Please come to UberCubeathon 2025 if you want to play.
I don't think it's necessarily a long-winded commercial. What I think it is,
the Penrose Cube will be there. And
what I think it is, I think it's a way that we understand that Magic is an expensive hobby, and we also understand that there's a way to reward players from just being able to play well, and if that's due to a cash prize or a product prize based on the the way that the sign up cost has been divvied out among the successful players, that's great. But there's also an opportunity for us as the host of this event, that we've been able to reward the players for just showing up and having fun. And there's something that's rewarding about that. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to buy a box. I'm going to chuck it out.
I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to go nuts.
If I can jump in here, so I will just say, the prizing is exciting, and I'm really looking forward to the event. I think as well, like it's just. I had an absolute blast at the event last year, and not just because I ended up doing reasonably well, I think, but it was just a really great vibes. I think you guys created a really good environment that was like a lot of fun to play, really welcoming. Everyone was like very clearly enjoying getting to play there. The Gathering Place is a great store, super chill. Lots of fun, and it was honestly really great to see throughout the day. All of us were playing Cube in kind of the one corner there, and around the room there's just folks coming in and playing Magic and Commander and whatever else around the tables. And I even had a couple friends who I was visiting down in the Triangle area while I was down there for the event, and they happened just to stop into the store in the afternoon to see how I was doing and whatnot. And we actually made plans to go and get dinner after that, and that ended up getting derailed by top 8. But I talked to them afterwards, and they said neither of them are Magic players, and they said that place is super chill. Like I would go back there. So even for people who were the kind of folks who'd be giving swirlies to Magic players in middle school, they were like, Gathering Place is a great place, and the event seemed to be a lot of fun. Their observation was like everyone seemed to be having a blast, so like something good must be happening here. And so that's been something that I'm excited to go back and get to experience again. I've been pushing it to my local Cube group here in DC. Excited to get to go and sling some more cards with you guys.
Well, I'm gonna segue a little bit, right? So we've talked really not as much as we plan to about the Penrose Cube. I'm gonna ask all of you guys: have you guys ever force of willed a cranial plating because you're going to die if that card hits the battlefield this turn? I'm just open that up.
No, Stu, I don't think I've ever had that very specific example.
No, you haven't. Okay, Anthony, has that ever happened to you? Lincoln, ever happened to you? No?
Yes, I have an artifact.
I can't, but I have definitely seen people play cranial platings where I say, "Oh, I guess the game's over."
Yeah. So what's
cranial plating's good
so
card.
Obviously artifacts are a big part of the Penrose Cube. The reason why I mention that specifically is because another person in our group, our good friend Samich, I had to do that in his cube, or one of his cubes. I had to force of will a cranial plating. Am I the only person on planet Earth that has force of willed a cranial plating? Probably not.
No.
But I saved myself from death by force of willing a cranial plating. To be fair, it did only keep me alive for one turn. But it really does go to highlight the power of artifacts. This is a big part of your cube. Tell us a little bit about the artifacts, and this is a synergy and archetype in your cube.
Yeah, so there's a number of different archetypes in the cube, kind of 5 or 6 core ones, and artifacts is one of those. And I think within each of the archetypes, and I'll give an example here from artifacts specifically. I try to make a couple different lanes of deck that is possible within that archetype, right? So in artifacts, you have kind of your really aggressive build where you have cards like you're doing kind of the affinity thing where you have a cranial plating and thought monitor and other things like that are cheap. You can put a lot of threats on board. You can throw a lot of damage down range, really quickly. And then there's another artifact deck that is really more about value generation over time. We're using cards like Ashar, Ancestor's Apostle, to bring back things from your graveyard. You're using cards like Goblin Engineer to loop higher value things from your graveyard and whatnot, and generate value from enter the battlefield effects and things like that. So there's kind of two different lanes you can go, but both of them end up being in the spot where like, okay, I care about artifacts, but I might open a pack and there might be 4 artifacts in there, or 3 artifacts or whatever, and I have to then figure out which is the artifact that my deck wants, because I guarantee you there's one artifact in that pack that your deck really wants. There's one that it really doesn't want, and there's 2 in between that you're probably hoping you could table, but are not the right pick right now. And that's really kind of where I've tried to go with this cube, is that it's a synergy cube in the sense that like there's a lot of the deck that is the best deck, the winning deck in the Penrose cube is not necessarily like, hey, here's a pile of the best, highest power, highest performance cards, but really like what is the aggregate effect of the synergy of the cards I've pulled together and assembled into a deck. And one of the ways I try to do that is for every card in the cube, or to the greatest extent possible, have those cards work across a couple of different decks, right? So a card like Goblin Engineer is interesting because it does 2 things. Number one, sure, it allows you to loop artifacts between your graveyard and the battlefield. Do that kind of Goblin Welder type effect at a little bit more balanced rate than Goblin Welder does. But number 2, it allows you to tutor an artifact from your library into your graveyard, right? So it allows you to feed your graveyard, maybe activate some of your delirium effects if you can get an artifact creature or something along those lines, artifact land. And so it's all of a sudden it's not just an artifact card; it's potentially fitting into a couple different decks because it has that other added piece there. And so I try to get cards that kind of fit across a couple of those archetypes. So I think that really the archetypal card for me, in the Penrose cube is Scrapwork Mutt. Why? Well, Scrapwork Mutt's an artifact. It's a creature. It's aggressive. It's a bear basically. It allows you to discard a card and draw a card when you enter the battlefield. So it enables the Madness deck and the Delirium decks and the decks that want you just to fill your graveyard up with stuff. Oh, and by the way, say you're doing self-mill and you just dump it in your graveyard. Great. It has Unearth, so I can bring it back from there. So basically across all of the archetypes, this card is perfect. And so if I could get to a place, if Wizards printed enough cards that were like Scrapwork Mutt that fit in every single archetype in this cube, and you have to open up a pack and think, holy crap, this goes across 5 different archetypes. What do I pick? I think that would really be my kind of ideal space there.
So I kind of want to, let's take that. So you said you had some core elements to this cube, and that's what's so fascinating about this. And like I said, when I see this, I see a lot of alignment to the Fey cube. I see so many striking characteristics between the 2 ideas where you're kind of playing these budgetary, you're making budget powerful. Like you're almost pauper, peasant, retail limited, but making it really like a constructed set. It's really awesome. But let's kind of talk about the top level. So I just want to give a brief overview. You've got aristocrats, you've got artifacts, you've got domain, which is fascinating. You have flicker, and you have graveyard, and you have madness. You can see where you've been very intentional of bringing together archetypes that find these, as you mentioned, synergies, this cross-pollination, this cross-enabling. So when players are playing this, they can either go down one of those individual lanes or they can find ways to connect the dots. And I'll use my really fast example. I was doing aristocrats and I was doing artifact synergies. These are both very comfortable for me. Like I found my lane, Sir Conrad, and then cranial plating, as we mentioned. And I did something with that. That's what I did in your top 8. Still lost, but it was very, very powerful. I just totally misplayed it. But I would say that that's what's so neat about this cube is you found a way to, how do you bridge the gaps? You've got some that are very defined. What was your kind of leading edge here? What are your pull together cards, your glue pieces?
Yeah, so I think glue is worth thinking about kind of in 2 different ways. One type of glue card is a card like Scrapwork Mutt, where like, is this the most powerful card in your deck? No, right? It is by no definition. If you drafted a deck where that was your most powerful card, you're probably not going to do very well. It is not an objectively powerful card, but it does a lot of things, and it does them at the right cost and at the right sequence in your game. That for a lot of different types of decks, it's enabling you to get to the thing you want to do. So that's the first kind of glue card you have. I think the other type of glue card are the things that are really pulling together something of like, key value for a particular deck. And so like cranial plating in the artifact deck, I think ends up being in a place like that where it's like, you need a creature on the battlefield to make this work, but it will get you there as soon as you have that. And so having cards like that, I think, doing some of the work as well is really one of the key things I kind of push towards.
I mentioned that specifically because I know how absolutely out of control cranial plating can be. You've also got Hogaak in this cube. Hogaak is, well, I mean, where would you put it in the top, like, X most problematic cards that have ever been printed in the history of Magic? Like, it's got to be fairly
To me,
up
it's
there,
not
right?
in the cube. I tried to run this last night. It is very difficult. It asks a lot of a player.
I think that's a you problem.
No, I think it's.
I think if you're having a problem making Hogaak work, that might be a you
it gets
problem.
bounced. It happened to me.
So Hogaak is objectively powerful, and there's lots of. First of all, it is definitely one of the most powerful cards in the cube, and the only reason it can be in this cube because the budget restraint is because it's banned in every other format, so it's a very cheap card as a result. But and you know, and lots of players I think have militated for Hogaak maybe being too strong for the cube for a long time. I disagree. I think because number one, you know, players like to have something they can kind of work towards, and number two, players love to be able to say, I managed to beat a Hogaak, right? Like they cast it 3 times from their graveyard. They cast it the first time on turn 3, like this 8/8 trampler, and I still managed to win. Like players love being able to tell those stories, and I think Hogaak is a card that kind of fits in a really unique place there in making things like that happen. But I think you know, going back to kind of this glue question, a Hogaak deck is not going to work unless it has a card like Stitcher Supplier, right? Stitcher Supplier lets you put potentially up to 6 cards in your graveyard by turn 2. Or 7 cards, I guess, if the Stitcher Supplier itself dies as well. And so that is the kind of thing that is enabling you to, by turn 2, cast a Hogaak. If you don't have cards like that, you're not going to be able to really use the Hogaak as a threat. And so when it comes to like building a deck, like sure, I think all of us could open a pack and be like, hey, Hogaak's in here. I know that's powerful. Let me grab that. Players can latch onto that and kind of have something that target they can build towards. But knowing those other kind of key enabler pieces to pick up across the draft, I think is a little bit more skill testing, and that's I think where the fun of the cube comes out. Where it's like, yeah, do I eat my vegetables and take up a quote unquote boring card like Stitcher Supplier here? Like, yeah, I probably need to do that because actually that is what is going to make me win more than anything else.
The reason why I bring up Hogaak, and we have, you mentioned it earlier, our good friend Sandwich's Bug Cube, right? So this is a card that's very prevalent in his cube, and I have drafted decks around this. Hogaak is always a card that I look at and think, how much work do I really need to put in to the rest of the deck that I'm drafting for Hogaak to be such a massive threat that if it comes down, especially like the fact that it can be cast from the graveyard, okay, you have to delve. Okay, you can't spend mana. Okay, you have to tap creatures. That by itself is a limitation, but not really a limitation, right? And I don't know how much, you know, build around is really required. Has that been something that's problematic for you? You know, you tell me, like in your experiences with seeing people draft this deck, have you seen that become such a like, oh my gosh, I have to focus on getting rid of Hogaak or I'm going to lose?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on the specific question of is it too easy to kind of enable that? Like, yeah, every deck wants to play creatures, you know, so they can invoke it out. Every deck ends up with things in their graveyard, right? You play spells and things end up in your graveyard. Is Hogaak too easy? That has certainly been a critique I've heard from players over the years, right? Like Hogaak can be really potent in that way. I think that my pushback to that is 2 things. Number one, the data doesn't hold up that it's the most powerful deck in the cube. There wasn't a Hogaak deck that 3-0'd this cube for the first year of its existence. And I have, you know, data from a bunch of different events that Penrose has been at now, and there have been decks that have 3-0'd with Hogaak, but there are plenty that go 1-2 or 2-1. And I think that does speak to the fact that like this card is not the be all and end all. On the second part you said there of you know, is it a card once you get it out, is it a threat that like the player has to deal with, your opponent has to deal with? That's 100% true. Like it is an 8/8 trampler. It's an 8/8 trampler that even if you kill it, it doesn't really go away, right? It's in the graveyard and it can be recast from there, and that is challenging. But I think that is not a useful heuristic to evaluate whether a card should be on a cube you should use to evaluate whether a card should be in a cube, just because any card that can end the game is a card that, unless it's answered, ends the game. Like that it's a bit circular, you know, to say that. And so is Hogaak, you know, that more so? maybe, but Sarah Angel is that if you don't answer it as well. And so, I don't think anyone would be saying like Sarah Angel in 2025 is too powerful. So it really is just a matter of degree there on does that cross a line. And in my opinion, it doesn't. Could there be a point in the cube's future where it does? Entirely possible. But today I think it still fits into like a useful spot in the cube.
So as we kind of tone this back, so Stu and I have been talking a lot, probably more than we should, because we're not the experts in this particular genre. I would say that May.
That's not true. I'm totally an expert in this genre.
We are not.
We have a podcast. How can we not be experts?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. We'll ask May because she's more of an expert. I want to lean in towards
May, going towards Lincoln here. With these budgetary restrictions, kind of highlighting how cards that you would, let's go to the vintage cube LSV you kind of mentioned early in the episode, or at least talking to us. We look at these cards as like the top tier of Magic, but it's interesting removing Hogaak from the conversation. We're kind of going into like cemetery tampering. We're going into these budgetary restrictions.
I'm actually going to fight you. We need to bring Hogaak back into this conversation.
I agree.
Why I'm bringing back to Hogaak, why this is important for the conversation, and why Anthony keeps drawing these comparisons between your cube and ours, even though you fundamentally break a lot of the quote-unquote rules of cube, right? Your colors are not balanced. You have multiple cards that are breaking singleton. And I love that. I respect it. I think that it's great because you are interested in the essence of density here. You are interested in giving the players what they're interested in drafting and the decks that they are looking to build. And the reason that this is important for Hogaak to exist, if this is going to be affirmation, I agree with you that Hogaak belongs in here. Because just like in the Fake Cube, power outliers need to exist in order to push certain deck archetypes. They need to be able to be the force to force the game to end. They need to be the obstacle. And Hogaak is that obstacle. It is not to say that Hogaak isn't a powerful card or doesn't work well in the environment or that its ceiling might be too good or whatever. It is to say that Hogaak represents a very specific kind of deck within your environment that the other decks need to inspire to work around. And when you have these key star pieces, as I like to call them, of these are your outlier cards, they are very much the key player of their decks, of their respective decks, and you have a few of them. But you have so many like glue cards and high enough density of the cards that make things work within here that even though Hogaak exists in here, it's not there's only going to ever be one Hogaak deck, right? And whether or not that even comes together is whether or not the other decks are taking their vegetables, so to speak. And I think that that's a balance that is underappreciated by a lot of cube curators. What I particularly like about your environment is the fact that you took a lot of what makes your cube do its thing and you amped it up. You threw caution to the wind and you went for it, and that is an energy that we need more in the cube curation space of it is okay to break rules. It's okay to not be balanced and whatnot. And that is where I feel that the comparison between the Fake Cube ends, because you're willing to push those archetypes to their limits. Those power outliers are important, they're intentional, and that needs to be not only respected by the drafter, but it also needs to be, I don't want to say endorsed as much as celebrated.
So, May, I think I agree with you completely there. I think that there is a tendency in the space to imagine cube as like like in physics they have the concept of the sphere of perfect density and perfect dimensions and
I'm guilty of that.
Space,
just
right,
to clarify.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Like you can make a cube that has incredible synergies, has incredible power. The power outliers are perfect. They're pulling you in the right direction. Like everything's balanced and whatever. It's a lot of work, and fundamentally, I'm a lazy person, and so I can get a lot of those same things out of the cube without taking that kind of spreadsheet aesthetics balancing into account. On the specific question of power balance and cards that are power outliers, I think part of it is, as you say, players want to be able to kind of be rewarded in that way. Players love to tell stories about and love to be able to beat those power outliers. And I think the third piece, and this goes back to, we're bringing it full circle here. This goes back to the grueling all-day event. No, if you opened a pack in a cube where all 360 cards was exactly the same power level, where there was literally no better pick for your pack one, pick one. Every card was equally powerful. It would be miserable to draft. It would truly be the most miserable draft experience because you'd open every pack and you'd go, what the hell am I supposed to take here? There'd be no way to make any kind of assessments. There'd be no heuristics to fall back on. And I think that having cards that are power outliers is a useful heuristic for players. All of us, fundamentally, none of us are super time-traveling, supercomputing machines. All of us have to fall back on heuristics, to some extent. And so having, hey, I know Hogaak is a power outlier, in your cube, things of that nature, I think is a really valuable tool for your drafters to be able to actually get more out of the experience of drafting while still being skill testing.
To kind of loop back into a lot of your design elements, I have a question for you. Is there ever a point in which that you feel inclined to cut like a color? Like I noticed that white is your least represented color inside this cube. And it's not to say that the domain deck doesn't want planes as an example as much as... Do you ever feel like that there is a point in which the functionality of these kind of colors might need to go just to double down, triple down on what people are wanting to play and increase the density and flexibility within the archetypes within what's currently working?
Yeah, great question. So obviously, like I have a lot more black cards. I think there's more than 3 times as many black cards as there are white cards in the cube, and I think part of this is really just I go where the cards take me and the archetypes take me, and so the specific question of colors doesn't really come up when I think through, hey, does this card belong in the cube or not? And just the natural effect of that has been white and green over time have gotten less and less represented. Could the ultimate end state of the cube be those colors are not represented at all? Maybe. I think it would take a lot. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on there still, but it's kind of been taken down to like a core nub that really has some interesting synergy with the rest of the cube. I think part of this is just a question of like what cards they print. So for example, one thing I've wanted, for years in white is a white unearth, right? So unearth is 1 mana. It's a single black pip for a sorcery with cycling 2 that says return target creature with power 3 or less. Sorry, converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. That effect they now produce in white. They just haven't produced that specific card. The minute they produce that card, I am putting that in the cube. And that will fit within what I want white to be able to do, to be able to play that kind of reanimator effect here. But as it is right now, I'm stuck playing cards like Helping Hand and Sivin's Reclamation and whatever. So it really is just a question of those colors are underrepresented to the extent that Wizards has downplayed certain aspects of their color identities that I find interesting with what's going on in the cube at the power level and at the card cost that is optimal for the cube.
Sure.
But if things get printed in the future that fit in with that, like you could imagine a future where white is twice the size where it is right now.
So, like, a big part of this has to do with your emergent design philosophy, and I take a little bit of emergent design philosophy in my own cube. And do you ever feel like that your emergent design philosophy can be a sort of hindrance in terms of, let's say, the flexibility or representation of different archetypes, or do you feel like that's kind of what the core philosophy of your cube is?
I think I would go more towards that being the core philosophy of the cube, right? Like, there's certain kinds of gameplay that I want to see happen. And so, when I look at a card, it really is, does it fit in with that kind of gameplay? And if it doesn't, it's fairly easy to go from that. Now, that changes over time. Part of doing that is like, as the cards in the cube shift, what that kind of gameplay feels like is going to be a little bit different. And then so things can get a little bit wacky. But yeah, I would say it's more the latter there.
All right. Lastly, my curveball question. Is there ever a point in which you considered throwing in things like Curd Ape and Loam Lion just to fill out your domain aggro whatnots?
Yes, both those cards actually were in the cube originally, and took them out after the first cube, or not the first cube. I'm sorry, the first cube that this was at, so second cube gone, because they were power outliers. I found. And the domain deck was one of the strongest decks that showed up there. And so I felt that was a little bit they were a little too pushed and made aggro in that color a little too pushed.
Sure.
Could they come back? 100%. Yeah. I love both those cards. I do love aggro a lot, much, to Stu's chagrin.
I just noticed the entire other suite. So
much to my chagrin.
Them are there, yeah. So they could totally come back, and there's nothing saying that we wouldn't have them at some point in the future.
That is a testament to this cube that Curd Ape by the way, I don't know if you guys heard this, is a power outlier. I just want to point that out.
Was. Okay.
It's a 1-mana 2/3. I mean, like, that's pretty good.
Well, Walden Cardinal's also in
when
the
it comes
cube
to an
as well.
environment like this, when we have things like Hogaak and other miscellaneous, like, I don't want to say top end, quote unquote, but are sort of power outliers that exist on our upper threshold. Aggro sort of keeps those archetypes in checks by proxy, and the stronger your aggro deck becomes, the more that it's able to keep these things in check.
And one of the reasons why I brought that up as far as Hogaak is concerned is because black is so, I don't want to say overrepresented, but it is so heavily represented. Like, Lincoln, you said yourself, black is the most prominent color in this cube. And even if green kind of takes a step back, black has the greatest ability to be an enabler of a card like Hogaak with things like Stitcher Supplier, where all you need is chuck stuff in the graveyard, have some creatures out, and all of a sudden you've got an 8/8 trample. Yes, it's not very, very easily repeatable like it was back in the dark winter of the modern days when, this was printed. I remember when Hogaak was printed. I remember those modern tournaments back then when it was like, this card's okay, right? Like, no, every modern deck ran Hogaak and it just went absolutely ham sandwiches until it was banned. So now you've got a cube where black is it's not even, I don't want to say overrepresented, but it is the most represented color, and you have a creature that is obviously inherently broken because it is an 8/8 trampler that you can recur from the graveyard and tap creatures and delve stuff from the graveyard to cast it. So I bring that up sort of semi-facetiously as a power outlier because this is a Q podcast, right? We want to talk about things like power outliers. We want to talk about strategy. We want to talk about where your decision, where the decisions have come from as far as the cards that you've included. But that is obviously, for me as a drafter, and I kind of take that position, I'm going to look at a card like that, especially if I see it pick one, pack one, and think, if I have any way to be able to break that, I'm going to take all the cheap interaction, all the cheap get creatures onto the battlefield, and with any way that I can to protect myself and get the Hogaaks out, I'm going to take it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's right. That specific deck does incentivize doing that, but it is at the end of the day only one option, among the things that can be drafted, and there are plenty of other decks, to May's point, that will pressure that deck really aggressively and really heavily early on in the game, and so. Sure, yeah, okay, you can put 5 cards in your graveyard by turn 3 and get a couple creatures down and whatever, but like if your opponent is playing beater after beater, that's not going to make a difference. And so I do think that the aggro deck here tends to be fairly strong and leaves lots of room for other archetypes to be viable because it puts a lot of pressure on that deck that's really benefiting from the graveyard.
Yes, the ceiling of Hogaak is Stitcher Supplier Hogaak, turn 2 Hogaak. Terrifying, right? However, this isn't constructed, and the floor
of the card is you never play the card, right?
Yep.
Like you can't cast it. You could draw every land in your deck, and you would never cast Hogaak if you don't put stuff in your graveyard and put
If you draw every land in your deck, you're probably not winning anyway.
This is true.
I don't know if that's a good metric for whether or not a deck is viable.
I guess what I mean, my point though is just
that
my point though is just that you could, if your win condition is Hogaak and you don't have the enablers to make it put it on the battlefield, you can't keep, or your opponent keeps board wiping and you can't keep 2 black and green creatures on the battlefield. Like the Hogaak is going to do nothing, and I think there are plenty of decks that understand that is the vulnerability. There is artifact hate in the cube that they can go directly counter the Hogaak, and so there are ways for decks to counter this that I think have been a reason that it has not been the most dominant deck.
So this episode's been captured by the Legaks and Hogaaks, but what I want to kind of talk about, mechanical synergy forward, right? Like it's kind of machine decks are expected. We're going to look for cross-pollination. As I talked about earlier in the episode, I did an aristocrats meets artifacts type of thing. I want to kind of do this because it's featured at UberCubeathon. So the players that want to win, the sweaty ones, right? They want to win, or the ones that want to have fun, but let's switch over real fast. How do you win? What's the winning line?
Yeah. So I think the winning line is number one, you do want to look for power outliers. So that does matter. That can make a lot of difference. Number two, build for synergy and draft for synergy, right? Just getting the most powerful cards together in a big pile is not going to be a winning combination here. You really need to have the sum of the parts be the total be more than the sum of the parts, right? You need to be building pieces that are coming together in that way. And I think the final piece is you want to respect aggro. If you are planning to go for a control build, there are a lot of very aggressive decks, particularly in black-red. Black-red is the two most heavily represented colors that are really viable in this cube. And so make sure you either are either in that deck or you have a way to respond to that deck, because you will play against somebody who is playing that deck. There are enough cards in here for there to be, 3 or 4 players at the table who are playing some form of black-red aggro. And, again, you need to be able to respond to that if you're not in that deck yourself.
So I'm expecting a full write-up again. I did my verbal write-up, right? I cheated through it and just did apples to apples, but I'm really looking forward to actually Lincoln's kind of full write-up of UberCubeathon 2025, right? And I'm excited about it. So how do the listeners, let's kind of start with this. How do the listeners reach out to you? Where can they read that document at? Because I thought it was pretty great, actually. And have you done it for other events you've went to? Question mark.
Yeah, great questions. So I can be found on Discord at Kapernimov, which I know is not useful, but
I'll include that. The spelling is nightmarish.
And I'm on Bluesky at DVDSN. That's my last name, Davidson, without any of the vowels. So that's probably the best way to get a hold of me, in one of those two forums. For that write-up, it was a Google Doc that I pulled together, so I'll pitch you the link again, and feel free to throw it in the show notes. I don't have a better way to host it because I don't have a website or anything. But yeah, I am definitely hoping to, do a write-up of some sort after this event as well. I took copious notes at the Salt Box in Baltimore this past weekend. I've just been busy and swamped with work, so I've not had a chance to type those up into something more productive. But I'm planning to do that, and I'm hoping to be able to do the same at UberCubeathon again this year.
Nice. And we are Swiss this year. We're not sudden death. We're not all things. So things had to actually happen on the fly, right? We had 64. We came to 50. The judge was amazing. Had to make judgment calls, literally, not a pun intended, as fast as possible to get it out there. And so we went with old rules of Magic. We had to do the write up you did was, it was perfect, but. Don't judge me, people who want to show up. We did what we had to do to make this event, fire. So no,
and again, I'll say again, I already said this, but it is worth reiterating. Like, I had an absolute blast at the event last year. I'm really looking forward to it, for this year. And I think you guys deserve a lot of credit for being one of the first groups to put out one of these smaller events. This is something that's new to the community just over the last year or two here. And so I had the benefit. I said this to you before we started the recording, but I had the benefit of getting to learn from what you guys did and kind of tailor my own approach. And when we held Capital Cube Championship, and I think we've all kind of seen more of these events popping up now and have all been sharing best practices and learning from each other. And so I'm looking forward to the event this year. I think it's going to be an absolute blast, and really excited for it. And
whenever you want to fire that event, we would love the exclusive. I need you to sign this contract right now, verbally. May's write it down. May will give you a signature.
My lawyers are telling me I shouldn't be signing anything under duress, but I'll certainly take it into account.
Well, thank you so much, Lincoln, for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. Can't wait for you to try to. So I'm actually going to have Tyro show up. We've already got like a king hat. I'm planning on it. Going to be wearing the king crown. Got to wear the crown, right? Got to wear the crown. We're going to play some like really cool music, like boxer style, right? Enter the room.
Rocker.
Like walkout music.
It's got to be rocky.
It's got to be rock. Maybe this would be an interesting addition to the top 8, I think. And I kind of want to do it at our event. Is we're going to have walkout music for all 8 players in the top 8. We're gonna have it. They can bring whatever costume, whatever hats, whatever else they want to wear. But I think something like this would add like a nice little touch to the event.
We're not gonna do any of that.
We're totally doing it.
So as we mentioned, UberCubeathon is happening on April 26th in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We talked about these. Thank you so much for the person. We won't say their name twice. Stephen Conefall. We love you so much.
You had to do it.
It's an honor. I know, right? I love him so much. But like the cards and oh my gosh, the loot that you will get at this, in addition to the prize support, is insane. It's like insane. It'll buy at least 24 eggs comfortably, right?
Nowadays, I don't know.
Maybe some bacon.
Maybe 3/4 of like a Tesla stock.
Other than that, can you take us to the socials, please?
First of all, huge shout out to all of our patrons, to Patrick, to Jeff, Nick, Chris, Timber Dragon, Brian, Keaton, Lord Justice, Nick, Preston, and Sam McKenna. You guys are just fantastic. Thank you for all the ongoing support. Really has helped. The microphone stand that I've got going on right now is very, very nice, I will say. It really helps with the quality of the recording. Maybe not with the sounds that are coming out of my mouth, but, you know, it helps. Again, UberCubeathon 2025, 64 players, 17 cubes. We got Swiss format, glory, prizes, and fun. April 26th at the Gathering Place in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We're going to have a sign-up link in the show notes. Come check out the Discord. I mean, it's going to be a huge event. We're now a TCG Player affiliate. If you want to go and support the podcast, use our affiliate link. Again, it's in the show notes.
It's very long.
Go and buy all of your Alpha Black Lotuses, your
Buy
Black
the
Border
fake cube,
Time
buy
Twisters.
the Penrose cube, spend $300.
I mean,
Post your
Lincoln's
own
Cube
event.
is pretty incredible. So you should just go clone it right now and buy all the cards through our affiliate link. Again, it costs nothing to you guys and just really, really does a great job.
Click.
Cost you a click. You can go check out the conversation at the Facebook Magic the Gathering drafting page, facebook.com/groups/mtgcube, where we have
Over a thousand. I don't even know the number anymore because
members.
it's like plus 1,000. You know, when they stopped counting?
It's 1,001.
1,023. I don't
It's
even know if it's a real
1,001.
number now.
We'll just go with 1,001.
Comfortably 1,000.
You can find us at Twitter. We are at UberCubeMTGPod. You can also reach us via email if you've got a longer question about this episode, another episode, or about the podcast in general. UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. Find us in our Discord. And again, huge thanks to all of our patrons. Patreon.com/UberCube. And I want to give a big shout out to Inked Gaming, inkedgaming.com/UberCube. They have really stepped up. Like their products have always been amazing, but they have really got some really cool stuff
I'm gonna have
that's
to
come out
stitch mats
recently.
for this event.
I
I'm
am like
lazy. I'm lazy.
I'm going nuclear when it comes to like little just little extra shopping for Magic. Get your dice bags, get your mouse pads, all that stuff. Custom, large volume products available. You can reach us at Bluesky, ubercubemtgpodcast.bsky.social, and ubercubemtgpodcast747 on YouTube.
Like the airplane that I'm on all the time, and I'm tired, man.
We're
man.
much less of a disaster than those 747s, though. Let's be honest.
I'm on them all the time.
All right.
Other than that,
Happy
Penrose
Cubing Hogaak.